I'm sorry, you'll need to wait in line. His voice was calm and steady in the busy morning's cafe. Light reflected off the polished floor where a woman in an expensive dress stopped cold. No one could believe it. A poor man had just told Victoria Hale, CEO of the city's largest real estate corporation, to wait her turn. She removed her designer sunglasses, revealing cold gray eyes. "Do you know who I am?" He replied quietly, "A customer, and every customer gets their turn." The air froze. She stepped closer, whispering in his ear. His face went pale. His hand stopped moving. She said softly, "You're her father." The cup slipped from his fingers, shattering on the floor. Lucas Grant was 36 years old, a former Air Force technician who now served coffee and wiped tables at a small cafe in Boston's working-class neighborhood. He lived with his 3-year-old daughter Lily in an old apartment in the East End district. The walls were covered with her crayon drawings, the furniture was secondhand, but it was warm and safe in theirs. His life had become a series of quiet routines. Hands that once assembled aircraft systems now crafted lattes and cleared dishes. He moved with military precision, efficient and silent, never complaining, never drawing attention. 6 years ago, he had loved a girl named Emily Ross from his hometown. They had been young and full of dreams, planning a future together. When she got pregnant, Lucas had enlisted in the Air Force to provide for their growing family, promising to return as soon as his training was complete. But life had other plans. Emily's best friend, Victoria Hale, had been with her the night of the accident, the car crash that changed everything. Emily died shortly after giving birth, her body too damaged from the collision to survive. With her last breaths, she had made Victoria promise to take care of the baby, to raise her as her own. "Don't tell him," Emily had whispered, blood on her lips, machines beeping frantically around her. "Not if he's still deployed. Not if it will destroy his focus and get him killed. Let her be safe, please." Victoria had kept that promise for 6 years. She had signed the adoption papers, given the baby girl the name Emily had chosen, Grace. She had raised her with all the love and resources her successful career could provide. But as Grace grew older, the questions began. "Mommy, do I have a daddy?" the little girl would ask, her wide eyes so full of innocent curiosity. Each time, Victoria's heart would break a little more. One night, unable to sleep, Victoria opened the old box of Emily's belongings she had kept stored away. Inside, she found a photograph of a young airman with a bright smile and kind eyes. On the back, Emily had written in her careful handwriting, "If she ever meets him, tell her the truth." Victoria hired a private investigator. It took 3 weeks to find Lucas Grant, former staff sergeant, honorably discharged after completing his service. He was living in Boston now, working at a small cafe called Morning Light, raising a toddler daughter on his own. Another child. Victoria's investigation revealed that Lucas had married briefly after his service, but his wife had left when Lily was just 6 months old, unable to handle the struggles of life with a veteran dealing with readjustment issues. So he was alone, just like Victoria. Both of them, single parents doing their best. Victoria stood outside Morning Light Out Cafe for 20 minutes before finding the courage to go inside. She watched through the window as Lucas moved behind the counter with practiced efficiency, his smile genuine as he handed coffee to grateful customers. He had no idea his first daughter even existed. When Victoria finally entered, the morning rush was in full swing. She walked directly to the counter, bypassing the line of waiting customers, her designer heels clicking on the tile floor. That's when Lucas spoke, not recognizing her, not knowing who she was or why she was there. "I'm sorry, you'll need to wait in line." Several customers turned to stare. Victoria Hale's face was on billboards across the city, her company one of the most powerful in New England. No one told Victoria Hale to wait. "Do you know who I am?" she asked, more from habit than arrogance. "A customer," Lucas replied simply, "and every customer gets their turn." Something in his steady gaze, his unshakable calm, reminded Victoria of Emily. This was why her friend had loved him. This integrity, this fairness, even when it cost him. Victoria paid for her coffee, waited her turn, and then, as Lucas handed her the cup, she leaned in close. "We need to talk. Privately. It's about Emily Ross." The color drained from Lucas's face at the mention of that name. Emily? How do you? I was her best friend, and I've been raising your daughter for 6 years. The cup slipped from his fingers before it even reached Victoria's hand, shattering on the floor in an explosion of porcelain and hot coffee. Around them, the cafe fell silent. I have a daughter? Lucas whispered, his voice breaking on the last word. Victoria pulled a business card from her purse, setting it on the counter among the coffee spills and broken ceramic. Victoria Hale, CEO, Hale Properties. It read in elegant script. Come to my office tomorrow, she said quietly. It's time you knew the truth. The Hale Properties building was a glass tower that reflected the sky, intimidating in its modern elegance. Lucas stood outside for several minutes, Lily's hand in his, before finding the courage to enter. He had arranged for his neighbor to watch Lily, but at the last moment he couldn't leave her behind. Some instinct told him this was a moment that would change their lives and they should face it together. The security guard initially moved to block him, taking in his worn jeans and simple jacket, but Victoria appeared at the elevator bank, waving him through. It's okay, he's expected. They rode up in silence, Lily chattering innocently about the tall building while Lucas's mind raced with questions, fears, and a grief he thought he had buried 6 years ago. Victoria's office was elegant and warm, filled with natural light. But Lucas's eyes went immediately to the photograph on her desk. Emily, smiling and radiant, holding a newborn baby with dark hair and Emily's exact smile. That's Grace, Victoria said softly. She's 6 now. She has your eyes. Lucas couldn't breathe. His legs felt weak. Emily is really gone? Yes, I was there at the hospital. She asked me to take care of Grace, to raise her, to keep her safe. Victoria's voice cracked. She asked me not to tell you if you were still deployed. She was afraid the news would destroy your focus, get you killed. She was trying to protect me, Lucas whispered, tears streaming down his face, and I wasn't there to protect her. They sat in silence, the only sound the ticking of an antique clock on Victoria's bookshelf. Tell me everything, Lucas finally said. Please. Victoria took a shaky breath and began. Emily was on her way to the airport. She was coming to see you, to tell you about the baby in person. She wanted to surprise you. She paused, gathering strength. A drunk driver ran a red light. The impact was catastrophic. Emergency services did everything they could, but the injuries were too severe. They managed to deliver Grace via emergency C-section. Emily held her for 3 minutes before Lucas covered his face with his hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Lily, sensing her father's distress, climbed into his lap and wrapped her small arms around his neck. I signed the adoption papers of that night, Victoria continued. I had no children of my own, no plans for any, but Emily was my sister in every way that mattered, and Grace needed someone, so I became her mother. Why now? Lucas asked, his voice muffled. Why tell me after 6 years? Victoria turned her computer monitor toward him, showing a child's drawing. In bright crayons, Grace had depicted 3 figures, a woman labeled Mommy, a little girl labeled Me, and a soldier in uniform labeled Daddy. She started asking questions I can't answer anymore, Victoria said. Questions about where she came from, why she doesn't have a father. I've tried to explain, but she's smart. She knows something doesn't add up. Victoria pulled out another drawing from her desk drawer. This one showed a soldier holding hands with a woman and a little girl. At the top, Grace had written in careful letters, "My family dream." She drew this from imagination, Victoria explained, but look at the details. The way she drew the soldier's stance, the shape of his face. Emily must have described you to her during the pregnancy. Somehow, Grace remembers. Lucas traced the drawing with one finger, his tears falling onto the paper. Can I meet her? That's why I found you, but Lucas, this is complicated. She thinks I'm her mother. She calls me Mommy. I can't just bring you in and upend her entire world without preparation. I understand. I'll wait. I'll do whatever's best for her. Victoria stood and walked to her window, looking out over the city. I need you to understand something. I love Grace with everything I am. I've raised her, nursed her through sicknesses, celebrated at every milestone. I'm not just her guardian. I'm her mother. I would never try to take her from you, Lucas said firmly. You saved her. You gave her a life Emily and I couldn't give her. I'm grateful beyond words. Victoria turned back to him, tears in her eyes. Emily made me promise something else. She said, if the time comes when he can know, when it's safe, tell him the truth. Let him be part of her life. I think that time has come. Before Lucas left, Victoria gave him a recent photograph of Grace. In it, she was laughing at a park, her dark curls wild around her face, joy radiating from every pixel. She looks exactly like Emily, Lucas breathed. She has your stubbornness, Victoria said with a watery smile, and your sense of justice. Last week, she organized all the kids in her class to share lunch with a new student who didn't have money for cafeteria food. Lucas clutched the photo like a lifeline. When can I see her? I need to prepare her first. Tell her the truth gradually. Give her time to process. Is 2 weeks enough time for you to prepare? I've been waiting 6 years without knowing. 2 more weeks seems like nothing. As Lucas and Lily left, Victoria stood at her window watching them walk down the street. Lucas bent down, lifting Lily onto his shoulders, her delighted laughter floating up even through the sealed glass. He was a good father. Emily had chosen well. Now Victoria just had to figure out how to tell a 6-year-old that the family she'd been dreaming of had been real all along, just scattered across the city, waiting to find each other. Victoria had planned to break the news to Grace carefully, over several weeks, building up to the revelation that her biological father was alive and wanted to meet her. She didn't get the chance. 3 days after Lucas's visit to her office, a tabloid published a photograph with the headline, Billionaire CEO Secret Scandal, Mystery Man Claims Paternity of Adopted Daughter. The photo had been taken at a charity event Victoria had hosted over the weekend. Lucas had been there as a server, hired by the catering company. In the image, he was bent down speaking to Grace, who had approached him asking for a cookie. Their profiles were side by side, the resemblance unmistakable to anyone looking for it. Someone had been looking for it. Victoria's phone exploded with calls. Board members, investors, journalists, all demanding explanations. The stock price began to drop as speculation ran wild about scandals, cover-ups, and impropriety. An emergency board meeting was called. Victoria sat at the head of the table, Grace safely at school, unaware of the storm gathering around her young life. You need to deny this, said Richard Chen, the CFO. Issue a statement that these claims are baseless, that you will not tolerate slander against your family. But they're not baseless, Victoria said quietly. The room erupted. You're telling us this random server is the biological father of your adopted daughter? Does he want money? Is this blackmail? The damage to the company's reputation could be catastrophic. Victoria raised her hand for silence. Lucas Grant is Grace's biological father. He didn't know she existed until 3 days ago. He's not after money or publicity. He's a good man who lost the woman he loved and never knew he had a child. Then make him disappear, someone suggested coldly. Pay him off. Get him to sign an NDA. Make this go away. I won't do that to him, and I won't do that to Grace. Then you're choosing a waitress over this company, Richard said flatly. The board will have no choice but to call for a vote of no confidence in your leadership. Victoria stood, gathering her things. Do what you need to do. I'm going to pick up my daughter from school and tell her the truth before she hears it from some reporter shoving a microphone in her face. She left the boardroom and drove directly to Grace's elementary school. The principal had already called, warning that media vans were gathering outside. Victoria picked up Grace through a back entrance, the little girl confused by the sudden change in routine. Mommy, why did I have to leave early? Because we need to talk about something important, sweetheart. They went to Victoria's penthouse apartment, high above the city, safe from the chaos below. Victoria made hot chocolate, Grace's favorite, and they sat together on the sofa. Grace, do you remember how I told you that before I became your mommy, another lady was going to be your mommy, but she got sick? Grace nodded solemnly. Emily, you said she was your best friend. That's right. Well, Emily had a special friend too, a man named Lucas, and Lucas is your daddy. Grace's eyes went wide. My real daddy? Like in my drawings? Yes, honey, just like in your drawings. Where is he? Why didn't he come before? Victoria took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. He didn't know about you. Emily wanted to tell him, but she got into the accident before she could, and I didn't know how to find him until recently. Does he want to meet me? More than anything in the world. Grace's face lit up with a smile that broke Victoria's heart. Really? When? Soon. But Grace, some people are going to say mean things about this, about us, about your daddy. They don't understand, and they might try to make you feel bad. Well, why would people be mean about me having a daddy? How do you explain adult cynicism to a 6-year-old? How do you tell a child that the world is complicated and cruel, that money and power make people suspicious, that joy is often treated as scandal? Because sometimes people don't understand love, Victoria finally said. That evening, Lucas appeared at Victoria's door. She had texted him, telling him everything. I can leave, he said without preamble. I can sign whatever they want, go away, let you protect Grace without me complicating things. Absolutely not, Victoria said fiercely. Grace deserves her father. You deserve your daughter. I will not let corporate politics destroy what Emily wanted for her child. But your company is just money and buildings, Grace's family. The next morning, Victoria called a press conference. Lucas stood beside her, terrified but determined. Grace was safely at home with a trusted babysitter, watching cartoons, unaware that her mother was about to change everything. Thank you all for coming, Victoria began, facing a sea of cameras and hostile questions. I'm here to address the speculation about my personal life and my daughter. She paused, gathering her courage. 6 years ago, my best friend Emily Ross died shortly after giving birth. I adopted her daughter and have raised her as my own. Recently, I located the child's biological father, Lucas Grant. He had no knowledge of his daughter's existence until last week. The room erupted with shouted questions. Victoria raised her voice over the chaos. Mr. Grant is not seeking money or publicity. He's a good man who served his country honorably and who lost the woman he loved without ever knowing she had given him a daughter. He has every right to be part of his child's life, and I will not allow anyone to shame him or her for wanting to be a family. Besides, hell, is your position as CEO in jeopardy? Someone shouted. If it is, so be it. My daughter's happiness is more important than stock prices. The conference ended in chaos, but as Victoria and Lucas left the building, something unexpected happened. The crowd parted and people began to applaud. Not everyone, not the cynics or the corporate vultures, but ordinary people, parents who understood love and loss and the impossible choices we make for our children. By evening, social media had turned the tide. #ChooseFamily was trending. Stories poured in from adoptive parents, military families, single fathers, all supporting Victoria's stance. The board called another emergency meeting. This time, they accepted her decision. Victoria surprised everyone, including herself, by announcing her resignation as CEO 2 weeks later. I've spent 15 years building this company, she told the board, but I've spent 6 years building a family. It's time my priorities reflected that. She remained as chairman of the board, providing strategic direction, but the day-to-day operations went to her handpicked successor. This gave her time for what really mattered. With her newfound freedom and resources, Victoria launched the Grace Foundation, named for her daughter and dedicated to helping children who had lost parents to accidents or military service. Lucas was offered the position of operations director. He had been reluctant at first, worried about accusations of opportunism, but Victoria was insistent. You know what it's like to serve, to sacrifice, to lose. These families need someone who understands. That's you. He accepted, bringing with him his experience, his discipline, and his deep understanding of loss. The foundation's first project was to create a community center in Boston's East End, providing after-school programs, counseling services, and emergency support for struggling families. Grace was there for the groundbreaking, turning over the first shovelful of dirt with a child-sized spade, her smile brighter than the sun. Lucas attended every event, every meeting, carefully building a relationship with the daughter he had only just discovered. They started slowly. Park visits where Victoria was always present, ice cream outings, trips to the aquarium. Grace was shy at first, unsure how to relate to this tall man who looked at her with such overwhelming love and sorrow. But children are resilient. They adapt. They forgive. One afternoon, 3 months after learning Lucas was her father, Grace asked him a question that stopped his heart. Did you love my first mommy? The one before? Emily, yes, very much. Do you still love her? Lucas knelt down to Grace's level. I'll always love her. She gave me the greatest gift in the world. She gave me you. Grace thought about this for a moment. Daddy, what was the scariest thing when you were in the Air Force? The scariest thing was not being able to come home. But you did come home. Yes, I did. And now you're home with me. Sweet Weimar. Now I'm home. Grace hugged him then, wrapping her small arms around his neck and holding on tight. Lucas closed his eyes, feeling 6 years of grief and loss finally begin to ease. Together, Victoria and Lucas planted a tree in front of the Foundation's community center. Grace named it Home, and they promised to watch it grow, just as they watched their unconventional family grow. During the Foundation's opening ceremony, Victoria handed Lucas a small wooden box. Inside was a silver necklace, delicate and beautiful. This was Emily's, Victoria explained. She was wearing it the night of the accident. I saved it for Grace, but when I asked her if she wanted it, she said something that surprised me. What did she say? She said, it should go to Daddy. He lost her first. Lucas's hands shook as he lifted the necklace. It caught the light, spinning slowly, and he could almost see Emily wearing it, laughing, full of life and hope. I can't, he started. Yes, you can, Victoria said firmly. Grace wants you to have it. But she also said that when the time is right, you should give it back to her. She said it travels through family, from person to person, keeping us connected. That evening, Lucas fastened the necklace around Grace's neck. You were right, he told her. It should stay with family, and your family. At the Foundation's first annual gala, Grace stood on stage beside Victoria and Lucas. At 6 years old, she was the youngest speaker, but her voice was clear and strong. My teacher asked us to write about family, she read from a note card. I wrote that family doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real. My daddy taught me that. The room erupted in applause. Victoria wiped tears from her eyes while Lucas stood with his hand on Grace's shoulder, his face full of wonder and gratitude. After the event, as they stood together in the Foundation's lobby, Lily ran up and grabbed Grace's hand. Can Grace come to our house for dinner? Can I, Mommy? Grace asked Victoria. Victoria looked at Lucas, who nodded. Of course you can. As they walked out together, two single parents and two little girls, someone in the crowd whispered, now that's a real family. And for once, the whispers were kind. 1 year after the press conference that changed everything, the Grace Foundation had grown beyond anyone's expectations. They had helped 200 families, opened 3 community centers, and provided millions in aid to children who had lost parents. But more importantly, they had created something that couldn't be measured in numbers or dollars: hope. On a Saturday morning, Lucas was back at Morning Light Café, not as an employee but as a volunteer. The cafe had become a foundation partner, providing job training for single parents trying to rebuild their lives. He stood behind the counter teaching a young single mother how to create latte art when Victoria walked in with both girls. Grace ran to him immediately. Daddy, look what I drew. She held up a picture showing a cafe, a tall building in a house connected by a rainbow bridge. 3 adults and 2 children stood in the center holding hands. That's all of us, Grace explained, together. It's perfect, sweetie, Lucas said, displaying it on the cafe's community board where it joined dozens of other children's drawings. Victoria ordered her usual coffee and sat at a corner table, watching Lucas interact with Grace and Lily, marveling at how far they had all come in just 1 year. He joined her once the morning rush slowed, bringing 2 fresh cups. The board wants me to take over as foundation director, Victoria said. Full time. They think your presence is intimidating to some of the families we serve. Too formal. Lucas raised an eyebrow. And what do you think? I think they're right. I think you should go back to what you're good at. Teaching, mentoring, being in the field. She smiled. I think I should handle the paperwork and fundraising. Let us each do what we do best. Are you sure? You built this. We built this, Victoria corrected, and we'll keep building it together. Lily and Grace returned, both girls covered in foam from attempting to help with the espresso machine. They collapsed into giggles, completely unself-conscious, completely happy. You know, Victoria said quietly, watching them, Emily used to say something that I didn't understand until now. What's that? She said family isn't about blood or marriage or law. It's about who shows up, who stays, who chooses you every single day. I thought it was romantic nonsense back then, but she was right. Lucas looked at his two daughters, biological and not, so different yet so inseparable. He looked at Victoria, who had kept her promise to a dying friend, and in doing so had become something more than friend, more than co-parent, family in the truest sense. Emily would be proud of you, he said, of what you built for Grace, of the foundation, of all of it. Emily would be proud of us, Victoria corrected. We're doing this together. And that evening, as the sun set over Boston, the four of them stood in the foundation's garden, looking at the tree Grace had named home. It had grown significantly in 1 year, its branches reaching toward the sky. Grace looked up at both her parents and asked, "Are we going to be together forever?" Victoria and Lucas exchanged glances. "Forever is a long time," Victoria said carefully, "but here's what I can promise. We will choose each other every single day. We will show up. We will stay. That's what family does." "So yes," Lucas added, pulling both girls into a hug. "Yes, we're going to be together." As the four of them walked home through the city streets, Grace slipped her hands into Lucas's and Victoria's, swinging between them, her laughter echoing off the buildings. A family built not from biology or romance or traditional structures, but from loss, love, and the simple choice to stay, to show up, to be home. If you believe stories of found family, second chances, and choosing love over convenience deserve to be told, please comment and subscribe to Hidden Heart Stories. We share the stories that should never be forgotten, tales of ordinary people making extraordinary choices, of families built from heartbreak, and of love that transcends traditional boundaries. Because sometimes the family you choose is the family you need, and sometimes home isn't where you start, but where you decide to stay.